I guess you didn't see it there. Okay. What was I saying? Oh, so she came back and she was my student aide her senior year, sat through the class again, and then took the exam. So unless you have the ability to do that, I don't know that I would retake an exam. So anyway. And the other thing, somebody was asking me if I can tutor you. I can tutor you, meaning like after school I can help you with stuff, but you can't pay me. Like I can't tutor you and get paid for doing that. If you're interested in having somebody like just tutor you specifically, it can't be me, but it could be Mr. Payne. You can't pay me to teach you a subject I already teach you. You'd have to pay a different teacher. So that's an option as well if you want to do that. Or you can just come get help after school for free. So that's probably a better option. Anyway, so I'm going to remind you a couple more times because I think you have to get this done before spring break, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know when spring break is, but I think it's that last week before this is due. All right. So I'll remind you a couple of more times. And then once again, if you're not sure or you don't know what to do about the exam, just come talk to me and I'll give you the pros and cons and whether or not you should do it. All right? Now, I think I've told this class this. I know I told 4th hour and 7th hour. Typically on the AP exam, the hardest part, because they'll send us the scores with all of the statistical data the following year, and they'll break it up into different centuries. Statistically, the worst part across the nation is these next chapters. The 1800s on the AP test is the most difficult. The multiple choice questions and the essay questions, people tank this section of the test. That being said, you need to make sure that your study guides are thorough and complete and good for these next few chapters. Renaissance, World War II, those are easier sections on the test. So maybe your study guides don't have to be as great. But for the 1800s, for chapters 20 through 25, I would really make sure that I took the extra time, read the chapter, and made sure I had good study guides because this is going to be a hard part of the test. And it's a part that's easily forgettable. So when you're going to study in May, or in May or late April, you're going to already have forgotten what we talked about here. So you'll make it easier for yourself if you do a good job now and take the time now. It'll be that much easier for you to study in May. All right? So good study guides. Got it? Bless you. All right. Chapter 21, let's start. The conservative order and the challenges of reform. Now this chapter deals with very specific dates, 1815 to 1832. Those are the dates that are covered in this chapter. All right, so we've got to go back to chapter 20. The Congress of Vienna is meeting. What countries are present at the Congress of Vienna? Austria, Prussia, Russia, Great Britain, France. Good. You've got those 5 countries that are meeting together, the Quadruple Alliance plus France, that are meeting after Napoleon has been exiled. And the point of the Congress of Vienna was to kind of to restore all of the dynasties and all of the monarchies that were in place before Napoleon took over. So that's the whole point of the Congress of Vienna. They're extremely, what ideology would they be? Conservative, liberal, nationalist? They're putting everything back to the way it was. Conservative. Europe becomes extremely conservative during this time period. That's why the chapter is called the conservative order. All right. Europe becomes extremely conservative. They're restoring old dynasties. They're putting old monarchs back into power, all in the hope of keeping order. That's really what the Congress of Vienna is trying to achieve. They're trying to keep order and stability for Europe. So this would be a very conservative time period in Europe. However, there are 2 different ideologies that are challenging conservatism, and that's nationalism and liberalism. So we're going to talk about these 2 ideologies, and the first one we're going to talk about is the emergence of nationalism. Nationalism is the most powerful political ideology. And what is nationalism? A love for your country. The sense of belonging to a nation the concept of nationhood, loyalty to your country, love for your country. It's a very powerful political ideology, especially in the 19th century. So, what composes a nation? The number one factor that determines a nation, everybody has a common what? Language. That's going to be the biggest factor in determining what composes a nation. Number one is language. The people speak a common language. Other factors that compose a nation: a similar culture, customs. So a nation is composed of people who not just speak the same language, but have a similar culture, customs, a history. They share a common history, a significant history. And they have to be what? There's a couple of different reasons we would not unify with Japan. We don't speak a common language, we don't really have similar cultures or customs. But what's the number one reason we wouldn't unify with Japan? They're far away. So the other factor in determining a nation is geography. You're residing in the same area as these people. So that's what composes a nation: language, culture, customs, history, and then geography. All of those factors are considered. So once you share those similar bonds, the people who share those similar bonds then want the same government. That's what makes nationalism political. That once you share those similar bonds of language, culture, custom, history, etc., then you go on and you have the same government. And the origin of nationalism comes from where? We've talked about it several times. What time period? Or what major revolution? The French Revolution. This is really where we see the origins of nationalism. The French were proud to be French. They're joining the military in record numbers. They're supporting Napoleon. The nationalism had actually existed before the French Revolution, but this is really when it starts to become powerful. So a good way to sum up nationalism: nationalists believe that political and ethnic boundaries should coincide. That's a good way to sum up what the nationalists want. They want their political and ethnic boundaries to coincide. People of the same ethnicity that are living near each other should be part of the same nation. They should have the same government. That's what nationalists want. The political and ethnic boundaries coincide. That's a good way to sum up nationalism. And this is going to be in direct opposition to what was achieved at the Vienna Settlement. Because like I told you before, at the Congress of Vienna, those countries went about restoring all the old dynasties and all the old monarchs. The Congress of Vienna was extremely conservative. Well, the nationalists don't want to be part of those old dynasties or those old empires anymore. The nationalists want to be able to form their own country. So this idea of nationalism is in direct opposition to what was actually determined or decided at the Vienna Settlement. Okay, a couple of problems with nationalism. First of all, give me some examples of how you see nationalism in the United States. How do people show love for their country? They fly flags. We stand up and we say the Pledge of Allegiance. We have support the troops bumper stickers on the back of our cars. 4th of July, fireworks. There's all different ways that people show nationalism, all of which are extremely positive. How can nationalism become negative?
Racism.
Racism, good. You love your country so much, and then you start to believe that everybody else is inferior. That becomes a major problem with nationalism. It can turn negative very quickly. People have extreme pride in their country at the expense that everybody else is dumb or inferior or not as great as America. You know, it was, I forget how young you guys were at the time, but it was after 9/11. which, you saw extreme nationalism and patriotism right after 9/11. And then I think it was in 2003, we were going into Iraq, and we didn't have French support. So how old were you in 2003? 7 or 8. All right, so I don't know if you remember this or not, but when the French didn't support us, our nationalism, our love for our country and our patriotism quickly turned negative against the French. And all of a sudden, anything that had the word French in it got changed to freedom. So French fries, we call it freedom fries. And I think they actually changed it on the menu in the Senate and their cafeteria. I think they actually, or they proposed to change the name of French fries to freedom fries. I don't think it happened, but anyway, somebody proposed it. That was dumb. French fries became freedom fries. French toast became freedom toast. French kissing became freedom kissing. I mean, people were going crazy with it. That would be an example of a negative kind of nationalism. Your country is better than everybody else. The other major problem that nationalists had to contend with, it's not just racism, that's a big part of it, but the other problem is the nationalists had to figure out, what do you do with the ethnic minorities in your country? There's bound to be ethnic minorities in a country. You're never going to draw the map lines throughout Europe or wherever you are perfectly so that everybody of one ethnicity resides in the same country. It can't happen. It's impossible. So then, how are those ethnic minorities treated? Are they represented fairly? Do they have a say in the government? This is something that nationalists had to deal with. That was a problem that they had to deal with. Many times, the nationalists just completely ignored the ethnic minorities and went about in creating their nation. So that also became a problem. The other things that had to be considered for the nationalists, which groups get to become their own country, and how is that determined? There are several factors or variables that determine who gets to become a nation. And you do need to know these different groups. Or these different factors. The first factor, the group has to be large enough that they can support a viable economy. There can't just be like 7 people who decide, yeah, we want to form our own country and get to do it. That's not going to work. It has to be a group that is large enough to support a viable economy. What does viable mean? What?
Reasonable.
Profitable, workable. It's going to be able to succeed. Secondly, they have to have had a significant history. For instance, the Germans, they're not their own country yet, but have they had a significant history? Yeah, I mean, we've talked about them, the Holy Roman Empire, we've talked about the Germans. What about the Italians? Have they had a significant history? Yes, but they're still not a country at this point. So it has to be a group that's large enough. It has to be a group that has a significant history. It has to be a group that possesses an educated or a cultural elite, a group of people who are going to be able to spread the language. Because language is going to be the #1 factor in determining a nation. So then you have to have, is that door locked?
Yeah.
Oh. Don't knock that over.
Me.
That's how you're getting your information today. So there has to be a group, an educated group or a cultural elite that is able to spread the language. Because language becomes the #1 factor in determining a nation. Then you have to have a group that is smart enough, educated enough, that can do that. And it says in your book, who did that tend to be? Who was responsible for spreading the language? What profession? Teachers. Yep. School teachers. A lot of responsibility of nationhood ended up falling on teachers because they were the ones that had to spread the language. And you have to be able to defend yourself. You have to be able, or you have to be a group that is able to defend yourself, not just defend your own borders, but also a group that's able to go out and conquer other nations. Because that's what nations do. They go to war with one another. And if you're gonna become a nation, you have to not only be able